My name is Tanner Anderson. I am one of the co-founders of Magic Hour Entertainment. Welcome to our YouTube channel, and please do not forget to subscribe along. And I thought it would be fun if we all went on a journey right now. Why don't we count down the most financially successful independent films ever made? One of the smartest sci-fi movies of the century was actually just a tiny little indie movie made for $15 million with a bunch of up-and-coming actors that hadn't yet broke out. Ex Machina. It was released in 2015. It was told by the genius director Alex Garland. In this film, it was well ahead of the AI revolution that the world would begin embarking on less than a decade later. It was sleek. It was minimal. It was contained mostly to one single location. All of this, it allowed them to keep the production costs down. So when it was finally released into theaters, making over $37 million worldwide at the box office, it was a giant win for the studio. Once again, proving the point that a film relying on well-executed ideas will always attract an audience. You don't need a giant blockbuster budget to make a great science fiction movie. In fact, despite its relatively small budget compared to its competitors, it still won the Academy Award for Best Visual Effects, beating out Star Wars: The Force Awakens. One of the most financially successful independent films of this century is a weird pastel-colored comedy about a hotel concierge. And The Grand Budapest Hotel, I absolutely love this film. It is so charming, and it was made for just $25 million, and it would go on to make an astonishing $170 million worldwide at the box office. It was released in 2014, and this is Wes Anderson's masterpiece as far as I'm concerned. It's quirky, it is visually absolutely perfect, and it's in his unmistakable tone. Every frame of this movie looks like it's a painting. Then, you add in a movie star cast, audiences absolutely love The Grand Budapest Hotel, but I think the critics, they loved it even more. Being nominated for 9 Academy Awards, winning 4 of them, proving something that has become extremely rare in Hollywood these days, that a completely original, quirky, director-driven film, it still can become a global hit at the box office. On paper, a romantic comedy about mental health issues and second chances in life, it should have become one of the most successful independent films of the century. But then again, Silver Linings Playbook doesn't have your typical up-and-coming artist behind such a small film. It was directed by the genius David O. Russell, and it featured movie stars like Bradley Cooper and Jennifer Lawrence in the lead roles and Robert De Niro in a supporting role. So even though the film was only made for $21 million, that kind of star power, it allowed it to gross over $236 million worldwide at the box office. Audiences, they connected with the messy nature of the story, the emotional underpinnings, and the laugh-out-loud humor. The performances, they were all around spectacular, with Jennifer Lawrence winning the Academy Award for Best Actress, and her chemistry with Bradley Cooper. It made this movie feel incredibly real. It became the first film in over 30 years to be nominated in all 4 acting categories at the Oscar, turning this small indie into an all-time Hollywood classic. Stories with impact, they don't usually come from spectacle. They come from things that feel painfully real. And one of the most powerful dramas of recent memory was Manchester by the Sea, a small independent film that was made for only $9 million, but it would go on to gross almost $80 million worldwide at the box office. This film, it is not flashy. There is no huge action set pieces, but it was so raw and painfully honest that Amazon decided to make it one of their first original movies that they distributed on their streamer when they acquired the picture. And the main reason it works is because of the incredible performances by the cast, like Casey Affleck's Academy Award-winning turn with his incredibly restrained, nuanced, and heartbreaking portrayal of a grieving father, and Michelle Williams delivering one of the most emotionally devastating scenes in modern film history. Audiences, they left Manchester by the Sea drained from the journey that they had just went on, and rightfully, the Academy Awards. They also rewarded Kenneth Lonergan for his incredible story, winning Best Original Screenplay, leading this quiet little indie drama into a place of worldwide acclaim in the process. A love story between a human being and a voice that is surprisingly heartfelt and extremely funny. Back in 2013, when this movie was first released, it was weird. It was strange. But today, not so much. Given the AI revolution that we're currently living through, Spike Jonze, he had always been a visionary, a unique director that can take a small independent film like Her and turn it into a hit, making $48 million worldwide at the box office against a $23 million movie. And for a quiet, dialogue-driven sci-fi romance, that is a massive success. And part of the reason why it was a massive success was how relatable this story felt. It explored topics like loneliness and technology and how modern relationships are changing before our very eyes. Plus, Joaquin Phoenix, he gives an incredible performance that carries the entire film, often acting alone, only acting to a voice off screen. And critics, they love this film. The movie earned 5 Academy Award nominations, including winning for Best Original Screenplay for Spike Jonze. And suddenly, this small indie about a man and his AI, it became one of the most talked about movies of the year that has only become more prolific in the years since with the AI revolution that we're currently living through. You don't need a giant blockbuster budget to make a great science fiction film. Sometimes all you need is a bold idea. In District 9, it felt so real to audiences when it was first released in 2009 because it was part documentary style filmmaking, making the entire world feel believable. Then you couple it with the incredible VFX, especially when you consider their budget. But on top of all of that, it wasn't just a story about aliens. Audiences, they connected with the messaging since it was also a social commentary on segregation, prejudice, and corporate power. In this movie, it was made for just $30 million. It would go on to gross over $210 million worldwide at the box office, earning 4 Academy Award nominations, including Best Picture, which is extremely rare for a sci-fi movie. And after that happened, suddenly this small little indie project, it became one of the biggest movies of the entire year. Nobody wanted to make this movie, so Damien Chazelle, he was forced to make a short film as a proof of concept and bring it to the Sundance Film Festival with the hope that he could get his feature film financed. And that plan, it ended up working because he was given a budget of $3.3 million to make his movie Whiplash. Not much, but enough to get his vision on the screen. However, when it was released in 2014, it not only became an awards darling, but also a box office hit when it made nearly $50 million worldwide. And this is one of the most intense films ever made, yet it doesn't have a single explosion or action set piece. It is just a young drummer obsessed with becoming one of the greatest musicians of all time and a brutally demanding instructor hell-bent on breaking him. And everyone will remember J.K. Simmons' Oscar-winning performance for his intensity and his truly terrifying energy that he brings to the screen. But Miles Teller, he also shines in his breakout role that would put him on the path to superstardom, showcasing his real-life drumming skills, helping lead this small indie film to becoming a giant success by any metric that you measure it with. A movie about a bunch of unemployed guys that decide to become strippers in order to make ends meet. No, sports fans, this is not a Channing Tatum installment of the Magic Mike series. It is the original male stripper movie in the form of The Full Monty, a British comedy released in 1997 with only a budget of $3.5 million. It would go on to do $250 million worldwide at the box office, plus tens of millions of dollars more in home video sales, since this was at the height of the VHS and DVD craze. And part of the reason that The Full Monty was so successful was because of its relatability. A group of men doing whatever it takes to make ends meet, surviving tough times with humor and with dignity. Not your typical Hollywood characters, a movie with a balance of comedy and heartfelt moments. And because of all of these things, the audiences, they showed up. And with this film, it actually ended up becoming nominated for an Academy Award. And this small little British comedy, it became a global phenomenon in the process. A black gay love story. I remember sitting in the theater during the premiere of this film and not knowing a damn thing about it. I had never even watched a trailer, and I was so captivated by what I was watching on the screen. Moonlight, it was unlike anything I'd ever seen before. It was so intimate and deeply personal, and it had these like alternating timelines that felt like chapters in a book when you were watching it on screen. Plus, it was only made for $1.5 million, and when it came out in 2016, the movie, it would gross over $66 million worldwide at the box office. It is a masterclass in storytelling, a film that focuses on moments instead of spectacles with incredibly real and emotionally honest performances. And then, at the Academy Awards, Moonlight, it was nominated in 8 different categories, taking home Best Picture. And suddenly, this tiny little indie film that was made for just $1.5 million, it became the most celebrated movie of the entire year. Sometimes the biggest victories, they come from the quietest stories. So, no, I am not stuttering when I say this. The King's Speech was made for just $15 million, and it made over $412 million worldwide at the box office. An absolutely insane return for a character-driven story that was universally acclaimed for his performances that included Geoffrey Rush's masterful turn as Prince Albert's unconventional speech therapist and Colin Firth's portrayal of a king with a stuttering problem who needed to overcome his self-doubt and his fears under enormous pressure as his country headed into a world war. And when the Academy Awards rolled around, it was nominated in 12 different categories, winning Best Picture over my personal favorite film of all time, in The Social Network. And suddenly, this small historical indie drama, it became one of the most talked about movies in the entire world. A simple movie that focused on mood and loneliness and the human connection instead of big plot twists. When Lost in Translation came out in 2003, it was an unexpected hit. A story about 2 people that are decades apart in age, bonding over feeling completely lost in a foreign city. A quiet, atmospheric film that is also deeply personal. It was made for only $4 million, and it would go on to gross over $118 million worldwide at the box office. And director Sofia Coppola, her use of lighting and colors, it really stands out. But so does the chemistry between rising star Scarlett Johansson and Bill Murray, who gave one of the best performances of his entire storied career, doing a balancing act between the comedy that he's known for and adding in a vulnerability that audience really hadn't seen from him before. And this film, it also, on top of being a hit with audiences, it was a hit with critics. It was nominated for 4 Academy Awards, with Sofia Coppola winning the Best Original Screenplay at the Oscars, making her the first American woman to win this award, resulting in Lost in Translation becoming one of the most talked about movies of the entire year. It's the first and only time during his storied career that super horror producer Jason Blum received a script and he had no notes, meaning when Jordan Peele submitted Get Out for consideration, the version of the movie that he sent in is the exact same version that you see on the screen. There was no changes made to it at all. It was made for just $4.5 million. That is an extremely low budget by Hollywood standards, but it was still considered a risk, with a known comedy performer and director deciding to switch genres to horror. However, when it hit theaters, the film exploded, making over $255 million worldwide at the box office. That is more than 50 times its budget. The kind of return that is almost unheard of in today's Hollywood, making it one of the most financially successful independent films ever made. And it's all because of the concept, a social satire that becomes a psychological horror, with the mystery building the longer you watch. It became a film that thrived off word of mouth, leading to Oscar nominations and Jordan Peele becoming the first black writer to win the award for Best Original Screenplay, proving once again you don't need a big budget for audiences to show up, just a brilliant idea that is well executed that leaves people talking about the film long after they've left the theater. I cannot express this to you enough. Napoleon Dynamite was the coolest movie on earth for teenagers like myself when it first came out. Purchasing my Vote for Pedro t-shirt from Hot Topic, it was akin to acquiring the Holy Grail. But Don't get it twisted, this movie is weird and the humor is incredibly dry. It is set amongst bizarre characters. Never has there been a more awkward movie that has been this successful, an indie through and through. It was made for just $400,000 and was released in 2004. It would go on to gross over $46 million, and that is even before we talk about the millions of DVDs this picture moved after it came out on home video. Audiences, they love this film because of how unique it felt. The unforgettable characters from Kip to Uncle Rico, and of course, that ending, the legendary dance scene. And when this movie started getting quoted everywhere by teenagers, word of mouth began to spread, and it became a dorm room classic, a meme before memes were really a thing, and one of the most defining comedies of the early 2000s. At first, the studio that acquired Slumdog Millionaire, they didn't think that it would succeed, so they actually considered making it a straight-to-DVD release, and honestly, it makes sense because when outside of Bollywood had there ever been a hit movie with Indian lead actors that centered around that culture? However, this movie, it is about so much more than race or a country. It's part love story and part thriller. It was made for just $15 million, and once it hit theaters in 2008, it absolutely exploded, making over $380 million worldwide at the box office. The story about hope and resilience, it connected with audiences all over the world, and when the Oscars rolled around, it was nominated for 10 Academy Awards, winning 8 of them, including Best Picture and Best Director. And then suddenly, this small indie movie became the biggest film of the year and one of the biggest independent films of all time. A movie about a failed motivational speaker, a rebellious teenager who refuses to speak, a depressed academic, and an inappropriate grandfather. Well, that is the ingredients for one of the most successful independent films of all time, because Little Miss Sunshine, audiences loved it for being chaotic, but also incredibly heartfelt. It was made for just $8 million, and when it was released in 2006, it would go on to gross over $100 million worldwide at the box office. Audiences, they loved the characters. Everybody was messy and flawed and completely real in their unique way. The movie, it balanced awkward comedy and surprisingly emotional moments about failure and family and acceptance. People loved it, and so did the critics. So when the Academy Awards rolled around, the film was nominated for 4 Academy Awards, winning 2, including Best Original Screenplay. And suddenly, this small little road trip comedy, it became one of the best underdog stories in the history of Hollywood. One of the most quoted movies of this century, Juno mixes awkward humor, indie music, and surprisingly emotional moments to deliver an incredibly heartfelt film about facing our fears no matter what age we are. And at the center of all of this is an incredible performance by Ellen Page that is so funny and smart and brutally honest. But what's crazy is this movie, it was made for just $7.5 million, an extremely tiny film for a wide theatrical release. However, when it hit theaters in 2007, it exploded, making over $232 million worldwide at the box office, with audiences falling in love with how unique it felt and how fresh it was. The dialogue, it was so weird and totally different from a typical teen comedy. Plus, the soundtrack, it helped give the movie a unique personality. And when the award season rolled around, Juno, it was nominated for 4 Oscars, winning Best Original Screenplay. And suddenly, this tiny little indie comedy, it became one of the most talked about movies of the entire year. Sometimes the movies that break all the rules, they're the ones that end up changing cinema forever. In Pulp Fiction, it wasn't one linear story. It jumps between multiple characters that are all connected in unexpected ways. And we had never seen this style before. Plus, the dialogue was so incredibly sharp, and the violence shocking, and the storytelling, it was totally unconventional. Plus, the movie, it didn't start as a big studio blockbuster. It was made for just $8 million, which was still pretty small even back in the early 1990s. However, when it hit theaters in 1994, Pulp Fiction, it became an absolute phenomenon, making almost $214 million worldwide at the box office, relaunching John Travolta's career and making him a bona fide movie star once again. And after the film won the Palme d'Or at the Cannes for the festival's Best Picture, it would earn 7 Oscar nominations, winning Best Original Screenplay for Quentin Tarantino, with this little indie crime film all of a sudden becoming one of the most iconic movies in the history of cinema. Tom Hanks is the reason that this movie exists. His wife, Rita Wilson, she's Greek, and she saw Nia Vardalos doing her one-woman stage play that would become the basis for this movie, and she told Tom Hanks that she thought it was hilarious. So he went to see it for himself, and after he saw it, he agreed with his wife. So he asked Nia if she would allow him to produce the film version of her stage show, independently raising the financing of $5 million, an extremely small number for any movie. However, after it was released in 2002, the film, it absolutely exploded, grossing nearly $370 million worldwide at the box office and doing millions more in home video sales. Audiences, they loved this film because it felt relatable. Even if you weren't Greek, the family dynamics, they were very familiar, from the overprotective parents to the loud relatives and the awkward wedding traditions. Word of mouth on the film, it began to spread, and it was able to stay in theaters for nearly 1 year, becoming the highest grossing romantic comedy ever at the time, proving that sometimes the biggest hits come from the most personal stories. The movie only cost $15,000 to make, with $3,000 of that money being used on a camera. It was shot at the director's house over the course of 10 days. However, after it was not acquired when it was screened at a bunch of film festivals, horror super producer Jason Blum, he saw the potential in the movie and he came on board to help re-edit the film and eventually sell it, which he did to Paramount. But the studio, they didn't even believe in what they had purchased, so they allowed Blum to keep 70% of the profits, but not guaranteeing him a theatrical release. However, during test screenings, it started scoring through the roof, and the studio realized that they may have a hit on their hands, so they started using real audiences' reactions of them screaming in theaters to promote this film. And when it came out in 2007, it was an absolute smash hit, making over $190 million worldwide at the box office. And for Blum, after the studio recouped additional costs to finish the film and market it, he walked away with $90 million in profit, which helped finance his Blumhouse empire that still dominates the horror space to this day. The first ever piece of fake news in history was the promotion for the Blair Witch Project, with the marketing making it look like as if the missing students in the movie were actually real. The filmmakers, they created a website and they presented the story as if it were factual during a time in which the internet was still very new. So a lot of people believed it, and the mystery, it made audiences curious, and they went to the theaters to see what was presented as found footage, like you were watching the last ever recordings the students ever made, and it appeared to all be real because of the shaky cameras and the screaming in the dark. People were absolutely fucking terrified of this movie. This film, it helped launch the entire found footage genre in horror that is still alive and well to this day. And this little indie film, it was made for just $60,000. And when it was released in 1999, it would go on to gross over $250 million worldwide at the box office, plus doing millions more in DVD sales when it came out on home video.